Today we are going to jump into what to do when you get a decline.
For some reason it doesn't get approved. We're going to go to option B, C, X, Y, Z, whatever we need to go to.
Hey, are you sure this person's never had a heart attack? New agents seem to have so much trouble when they get a decline, and a lot of times I think it's more up here than anything else. So
because I'm the expert who's going to apply you for the right application until they're approved and that first premium's gone in and that commission's in my bank account. Until then, I'm still at work, no matter what.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. You like that's our new theme song opening. Welcome to the How to Sell Insurance podcast. My name is Ryan Federico. I am here as always with the best guests in the world, Mr. DJ Debt-Free Keith Fonseca, and the fighting pride of Pensacola, Florida, Mr. Ashton Delango Lunday, sipping on an iced coffee on a beautiful northwestern Florida afternoon. So, man, great to have you guys here. Today we are going to jump into what to do when you get a decline for a client. This happens all the time. A lot of times it catches new agents off guard. We've built up so much professionalism and we fought so hard to get that application in and to make that W stick on the board. And then we hear we hear that daunting contact back from the insurance carrier that's your client has been declined, or due to what we found in the prescription database, we're not going to be able to extend coverage to your client or something like that.
That damn database.
And so that damn database, exactly. Those damn underwriters. Why can't they just take everybody with every illness? Now, we know that not all the time every client is going to be completely honest and forthright. I like to think that a lot of the times clients just are ignorant. They're not actually lying. They had a heart attack 5 or 6 years ago, but they've been going to the doctor regularly, and the doctor's like, yeah, you look great. You keep on going, keep taking that medication. Everything looks good. And so when you ask them, hey, any medical issues that we need to know about? They're like, nah, my doctor says I look great. Doesn't change the fact that they had a stroke 2 years ago. They're just not thinking about it like that because that's the information they get back from their doctor. Of course, we're always going to run into clients who want to omit information and see if they can pull a fast one over the insurance carrier, and they're not telling you 100% of everything. So everybody's got to deal with declines. Everybody's got to deal with ratings and rejections and things like that. So we want to just dive into how to deal with those. And we're going to cover 3 different segments. We've put our heads together. The first segment we're going to jump into is how to prepare yourself for a decline happening. Number 2, we're going to be talking about what to do in the appointment when you're running an appointment with somebody to prepare the client if there's a decline, to give you an in to write another policy for them. And then number 3, we're going to jump into is how to actually handle having the conversation with a client after a decline happens, and how do you bridge that sometimes very uncomfortable conversation for a new agent. So before we jump into those 3 things, we want to maybe toss it over to our master of mindset, Mom, Keith Fonseca, and talk about maybe why you think agents struggle so much with this. It seems pretty simple to me. Somebody gets declined and we just call them back and go, hey, we're going to take another shot somewhere else. But new agents seem to have so much trouble when they get a decline. And a lot of times I think it's more up here than anything else. So what's the mindset that you had to develop when you were maybe getting your first set of declines to make you really effective at going back and getting a second policy written or finding a solution for that client?
You know what I think is so supremely important is to have some clear understanding and expectations going into this as an agent. Never mind as the client, understanding that at no time is any application approved until the carrier approves it. And so I'm dealing from assumption, right? And I've been trained and I've been mentored to come into this and work through assumption. Especially as a new agent, I'm excited. I'm going to protect families. I'm going to make money for my family. And I get that victory in my mind. I want to celebrate. They applied, right? And I've got that application in. And I just have to remember that, it's so supremely important in this industry to understand there's going to be people that don't qualify. But I have to sort of work from a position of you will qualify. That's the mindset of the agent that's winning. You're going to qualify based on the information that you've given me because I'm the expert who's going to apply you for the right application. Now, if they haven't given me, all the information that I need, and I know we're going to get into these topics, I have to remember going into this, I'm the doctor. I'm in charge. I'm the lawyer. I'm the problem solver. And so when I present myself as that problem solver, I can't have my own expectations that suddenly get unmet. That, we know expectations are the recipe for disappointment, right? Because when they're not met, when I expect them to get approved and I expect to get paid to pay my rent, to pay my car, to, put food on the table, then was it my expectations or was it really the decline that need to be revisited? And so, making sure as a new agent going into this that, I fully understand that I don't get paid, I don't have a victory until they're approved and that first premium's gone in and that commission's in my bank account. Until then, I'm still at work no matter what.
That's a great mindset. And, for some of you guys who are listening to this, you may be working at a captive agency. You may only be appointed with one carrier and only have one product. And so it's going to be a little bit difficult for you in this because we're coming at it from a position of you have multiple products to offer. And we talk to captive agents all the time that come to us saying, hey, I got a decline on this person. I can't put them with my company. Is there something that I can do with you? And we do referral partnerships all the time with people who are in that position. So if you find yourself only with one product and, maybe your carrier doesn't really have a B option or a C option for you to go to, there are other options for you out there working with some referral partners who, maybe work at brokerages who can do a split deal with you or things like that. But, definitely explore the options on the table that are going to most effectively help that family and get them protected. So let's talk about real quick, just sort of the first stage. The first stage is, what am I doing when I'm setting that appointment with that person? Now, this could be a lead that I'm calling. This could be a family member or a warm market. This could be, some other way that I'm getting in front of somebody who is interested in insurance. And I've identified that. Now I need to find out what's going on with them in order to know, are they going to qualify? I have interviewed hundreds of agents from different parts of our insurance industry, specifically in the life insurance sales side. And there seems to be this almost how most agents start in this business is they just kind of call a lead and they say, I'll see you on Tuesday. Bye. And they get no information about the person whatsoever. They don't know if they smoke. They don't know what their height and weight is, if they're going to qualify. They don't know what their health concerns are. And so they're really put in a tough position when they get into that meeting with that client, whether they're going in person, or they're going over the phone, or they're working on a webinar like Zoom or something like that. They're in a real tough position because they have nothing that they can research and prepare themselves and game plan for that appointment. And so they have to get really good very quickly at on the fly diagnosing what product can this person qualify for. And that type of agent gets way more declines than somebody who's doing a little bit more pre-planning work, just because you don't really know what to do, especially if you're new and you don't have any training, right? You don't know what people qualify for. You're just kind of shooting from the hip going, oh, I hope they qualify for this, and I hope the carrier says yes, and you haven't done any of that pre-planning. So when I'm on the phone with a client, I like to dive into their medical concerns, and you're really going to need to know specifics about their medical concerns. I like to take it into 3 categories. Number 1, Mr. Smith, have you ever had any minor medical health illnesses like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, something like that? Get the minor stuff out of the way. They'll tell you, yeah, I got high blood pressure. Yeah, I've got diabetes. Okay, if they tell me yes, I want to get some detailed information about how long they've been diagnosed with that, how many medications are they taking for it. So if somebody tells me, yeah, I've got diabetes, okay, when were you diagnosed with that? Why? Because there are certain carriers that will approve people who've got diabetes if it has been within a certain time range that they've been diagnosed, or if they were past a certain age when they were diagnosed. And there are certain carriers that will accept people no matter what. So, I say, when were you diagnosed with that? What kind of medications are you taking for it? Are you taking oral medications, or are you taking insulin if it's diabetes? How many medications are you taking for that high blood pressure? And they tell me, oh, we're taking 2 medications. Okay, great. So after I get the minor stuff out of the way, I want to move into, have you ever had anything major happen to you, like heart attack, stroke, cancer, any hospital stays, things like that? That way now they're going major stuff and they start racking their brain of, yeah, I've had heart attacks, I've had strokes, I've had cancer, or I went in the hospital for this condition. Oh, okay. When were you diagnosed with cancer? What kind of cancer was it? What did they put you through? Where are you at today? Why were you in the hospital? How long did you stay there? When was that? Because there are certain look back periods that the different insurance carriers have, and I'm not going to know what this person qualifies for unless I get clarity on those things up front, so I can do my homework and my game planning and make sure I know what they qualify for before I go meet with them and go over those options. Now I'm asking them about medications is the third one. So the first one is minor, second one is major, the third one is medications. What kind of medications do they have you taking? And this is where I want to get the names of the actual medications that they're taking. People are taking all kinds of crazy medications, and they could give you some 34-letter medication. I don't necessarily need to know what the medication is as much as I need to know why they're taking that medication. And you'll learn things like, most of the time, if somebody's taking a beta blocker, which, is a heart medication that ends in LOL, it's always the fun one. Typically, that means they've had some major type of heart condition. They've either had a heart attack or a stroke or a circulatory disorder. And you'll learn this stuff along the way, but it came from pre-planning and asking, what medications are you taking, and getting the names of those medications and the dosages of those medications. And then I wrap it all up past that with the last question, which is, what's your height and weight? If you lead off a call, at least I found for me, if I start off a call and I go, hey, Ashton, I got your letter here requesting mortgage protection coverage, or I've got your request for life insurance coverage. What's your height and weight? A lot of times it's a very defensive question, even for men, but especially, if you get women on the phone, it's not something, it has always delivered more of pushback for me to ask height and weight up front than it is after I've asked several medical questions. So I want to break it down, like I said, into minor medical illnesses, major medical illnesses, medications, and then height and weight, rather than just going, do you have any medical issues that we need to know about? Because if you just ask, do you have any medical issues that we need to know about, it leaves so much room for the client to be like, no, I'm healthy. The doctor says I'm good. Versus that same person having cancer 5 years ago and beating it, and now I apply them for a term coverage and they get declined because I didn't ask them any details about their health. So I've heard a lot of people that do in the last 5 years and then say, how about the last maybe 10 years? How about the last 15 years? And they do kind of a backtrack through history where somebody can rack their brain about it. That's cool too. But I just want to make sure that I'm getting enough information on the phone call with them to figure out what they're going to qualify for and to have a good game plan when I go into the appointment. Then when I go into the appointment, and this is where I'm going to transition over to Keith, who I think does an incredible job at the end of the sale of being able to get somebody's head wrapped around that we might get declined, and he's going to go into that in just a minute. But when I'm in the beginning part of the sale, I want the client to know the insurance company is going to see everything. And I want to make sure that they understand they're going to pull your prescription history for the last 20 years. They're going to pull your medical records. They're going to look at the MIB report, which is going to tell them anything that you've been diagnosed for. They're going to see it all. Because usually when I explain that to clients, it's funny how some extra information comes up. Or that other medication that they were taking kind of gets pulled out of the medicine cabinet. Well, I also was prescribed this, but I never took it. Oh, when were you prescribed nitroglycerin? You know what I mean? Or something. It's always like something like that. If I tell them, hey, when we apply for insurance, they're going to see everything. They're going to pull this, and this. And so we got to be as truthful as possible up front. New information seems to come out all the time. And if you're a new agent, you may want to have, set up with your mentor or whoever brought you into the business that when you're running your first set of appointments, if you encounter that new information, that you can kind of call them as a lifeline and get their help for what to do. You may want to rebook another appointment with them for when you can actually research that new medication and make sure they qualify for it. Probably the worst thing you can do is just trudge forward and apply them for what you thought they would qualify for originally, because that's how you're going to get a lot of declines, and it's going to be difficult for you to get that client back on the hook. So, Keith, let's transition over to you to talk about that second part, which is, now I've done my due diligence. I've created a game plan for the client. Let's say I've run my appointment, I've executed that game plan, and we've filled out an application. What are some of the things that you're doing to prepare your client, just in case you get a decline, that you have that space to come back to them and be able to offer them another product?
Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan. A couple of things. Earlier you were talking about clarity. So clarity is super important, right? The whole time, if I want to be, an agent that gets most of my policies approved beforehand, being very clear and specific with folks is really, really important. About expectations, I like to under-promise and over-deliver. So I really like to say, this could take 10 to 14 days, even if I know in my back pocket it could be approved by the end of the appointment. Because that allows me to play the hero, right? I always want to be in a hero space, but I also always want to let them know that, this process, while doesn't require, if we're doing, sort of the simplified stuff, and I know some of you are doing the pyramid type stuff, fully underwritten, but if this is, sort of the simplified stuff, I always want to make sure that I'm extending the time a little bit, giving myself room and space to deal with something that's going on. Additionally, control is super important. So just to give you an example, I have an agent, shout out to David out there, who was with a client and called me during the appointment. And, I spoke to the client a little bit, and he said he had no medical issues, none. And their problem during filling out the application was he hadn't been to the doctor since he was 13, and he's 35 right now. Now, as an agent out there, especially when I'm a new agent like David, that was great to him. And I knew something was up. When was the last time you ran into somebody who hasn't been to any doctor in 20 plus years? Right? It's rare. So my immediate question was, okay, sir, have you been to, any urgent care nearby? All of a sudden it was like, I went there 4 years ago, and there was this, and there was this, and there was this. So you sure there were no medications you were taking from that? Is there no medication you can remember? Any doctor prescribed anything? And no, I'm fine. And, 20 minutes later, he was declined for a prescription report. Right? So we've got, clarity and control are so important in understanding that, reference power, massive power questions, right? Go back to, a previous podcast where it's so important to dig and dig and dig and dig. And also then setting up those expectations, clarity, control, expectations. So once that application goes in, and for me, it's before the application, at least throughout the entire process, that I'm setting those expectations that, hey, this is what's going to happen, and I'm not saying you're getting approved, right? Because I just never know. I'm saying things like, once you're approved, once the carrier reviews and they make their decision and you're approved, rather than saying...
if you get approved.
If you get approved, yeah. Rather than saying, no problem, this will be approved. That's what I call over-promising. And then I have an opportunity to under-deliver, and it makes me look bad. It makes the whole process look bad, and I'm not actually putting their best interest at heart at first. I'm just taking the opportunity to kind of suck them into a sale that may never be a sale, and then I lose the opportunity to come back to them with like a secondary, option. So definitely,
Sure.
Control, quality questions, and setting clarity, great expectations.
So let's give them something specific. So let's say you just wrote an app. They filled it out. Maybe you got instant approval, right? Maybe you didn't get instant approval. I love products with instant approval, but I think all three of us have gotten instant approvals that turned out to be declines in a couple days.
Sure.
That happens quite often.
Yep.
Especially with the we won't name the company, but the most popular instant approval company, certainly backtracks on on a lot of their policies. So let's talk about, you just wrote a policy. What are you telling to the client at the end of the appointment to create that space? Like, what are you specifically saying to them that allows you the door to be open when you do get a decline to be able to go back and write them a different product?
Now that our application's in, here's what I expect to happen. I expect them to approve this policy inside of 14 days. However, there are times where things potentially that both of us missed. And so once they do their underwriting, they're going to come back with a decision. If that decision is not what we expect, because we can't fully guarantee what they're seeing versus what we're seeing, we're going to take the next steps to make sure we get the protection in place that we talked about for your family. Now, it may sometimes not look and feel exactly like we set up here, but rest assured, no matter what happens, you're now in the family with us, and I'm going to make sure you guys are protected no matter what.
So reaffirming your commitment, opening up the door that if something goes wrong, you're going to be there to take care of them. And is there any specific direction that you give to them? Like, I've heard people say, hey, if this happens, I may need to get you on the phone. Are you guys available? Do you, are you better by text? Are you better by email? Or do you just kind of leave it at that? I'm committed to you, and I'll let you know one way or another.
No, I definitely want to add, please know I'm going to communicate with you throughout the process. Some of these carriers have a little bit of an arduous process because, they've got billions of dollars on the line, and they want you as a client. There's no application I've ever put on where a carrier said, we can approve them, but we don't want them as a client, right? They want you as a client. They want to do business with you. And so I'm going to communicate with you throughout the process what exactly is happening, what they're requesting. And, you can help me at being part of the process if I reach out to you for a question or an answer. Maybe we can get on the phone or do a text that day, so that way I can get it into them quickly. So the sooner the better. Now, with some carriers, I'm also adding this last piece. Hey, thank you. Part of the application and taking your banking info was creating temporary insurance. So right now, you're covered if something should happen, as long as you would have been approved, right? I'm claiming that win right there and then so that they feel a win too, even if I know we're going to have to take some time and go through a process and, there's something on that MIB that they didn't remember, or they got a script for, some sort of something that they didn't realize is, oh, it was for this and I just didn't think about it. Like, how often does someone ask you out in general society, what prescription medication have you been prescribed in the last 5 years? I mean, if you ask me that right now,
Right.
I'm going to leave out like 75% of it and not think about it. And what do I know that this one little prescription was, related to this one illness that this specific insurance carrier was looking at sideways, the underwriter just didn't understand, and they're going to send me a question about it, or the system's going to automatically decline. And, a lot of agents will treat that as like, a bomb just went off. Well, I shouldn't say bomb, but you know what I mean? Like right now, like it was a big deal. Something just happened and, it just devastated them. Oh my God, there's no solution here. And the problem is I didn't prep the client that could happen.
Yeah, man, it's so good. And I hope everybody is able to rewind that segment and take some notes on it, because it's such an important piece of posturing and to put yourself in the best position to make money and to protect families. Is I do think a lot of new agents come in and they study for their exam and they go through, the trials and tribulations of putting themselves out there and setting appointments, whether they're doing warm market or whether they're doing leads or something. They're learning scripts or learning rebuttals or going through a rejection, and they finally get that application written and they're like, yes, and they're they're stoked that they got it, and then they get a decline. And it just takes the wind out of their sails, and they're just bummed out, and they don't want to call the client, and they don't want to do that extra work to get the client covered because they kind of feel like they've already done the work, when they just didn't quite know that the work is actually done when you set the appointment. The work is actually done when you start running the appointment. the work is actually done, like Keith just did, opening that door for if a decline happens, posturing yourself in the right position. So, you might be doing some of the work. You're just not really doing the work well yet, so.
Yeah, there's so many
I
agents
would-
that don't follow up after the decline. And so I want to say
yeah.
two things to them. Shame on you for telling that family that you were going to protect them. And when you got the decline, you just moved on to someone new. And thank you, because folks like us are following up with them, finding out that they got declined and doing the heavy lifting to then all of a sudden get them protected, and not realizing that that one decline and that one ignored family member could have been like 60 more referrals, like folks that we know in this business who take advantage of that. So every decline is another approval in waiting when you really do the hard work for that family, because then they're going to say, oh man, that Ashton Delango Lunde, he went stretches and miles to make sure that we got this insurance in place. He's the only person we deal with. You should definitely deal with him too.
Oh, and that's a great transition over to Ashton. Ashton, I would ask you first, at the end of an appointment, before we go into what you do when a decline happens, at the end of an appointment, are you saying something similar, like Heath is saying, giving yourself, sort of a door to get back into the appointment?
Yeah, I set it up in the beginning when I talk about my expectations kind of for the appointment. I'm going to go, hey, here's what I'm here to do. We talked about those power questions and power statements. We're going to be getting an application today. And if for some reason it doesn't get approved, we're going to go to option B, C, X, Y, Z, whatever we need to go to. And I'm setting that expectation that if for some reason we aren't approved, then this is what we're doing. And then I leave that reminder at the end if it's not something like an instant issue and it's, even if it's simplified issued, it's going to take a few days. Some of those carriers out there, even simplified issued, will take, 3 or 5 days for a manual review. Maybe something popped up in the medical record and like, hey, we want to manually check this. This is simplified issued. It's an instant issue product, but we see a few things that aren't lining up. Let us manually check it. So if something like that happens, hey guys, just a reminder, they're going to be taking their time to look over this, typically 3 to 5 business days, sometimes a little longer, sometimes a little shorter. And if for some reason, again, it doesn't get approved, then we'll get back together and we'll go to option B. It happened to me last week. I put in a case. It was simplified issued. Said, hey, well, we got to refer this to our team for further review. But then 2 business days later, it came back and said, all good.
So now let's say you did that. You set up the expectations, and you're 3 days down the line, and you get that dreaded email from the underwriting department. Due to XYZ, we're going to decline this person. Or they ask you a question. Sometimes this happens. They ask you a question. Where they're going.
Yeah.
Hey, are you sure this person's never had a heart attack? Or we noticed that the question, can you re-ask question 15A, or something like that. And the reason why they're asking that is because they see in their medical records that they have had that condition, and you answered no, and the answer should be yes. And so when you get that email, you get this decline, and you've left the door open with the client. So now what does that conversation sound like for you when you're going back to the client to tell them you've got declined and we need to go a different route?
Yeah, of course, I'm first going to go talk with the carrier, figure out why there was a decline, get as much information as that carrier will give me. Some carriers give more, some carriers give less, and I'm going to figure out what they should have said yes to on the application. And then once I get that information, I'm going to go talk with the client, maybe see if anything jogs their memory. But when I get that call, I'm simply going to go, hey, we finally got all the information from the carrier. We got that decision. When's going to be a good time to get back together and go over all this information about the policy? And I'm going to go set another time for an appointment, whether you're in person or virtually. I'm going to set another time to get back in front of the client. And then by that time, I'm going to make sure that, hey, if this is true, then I'm going to make sure that here's option B. Sometimes you're going to say, hey, we're seeing they should have said yes to congestive heart failure. And then you go talk to them, and it's like, well, we take this medication. It's not for that. It's for blood pressure. And then sometimes it'll be like, oh, okay, sure. Like, we'll issue it. I had a case where a lady had an inhaler, and they thought it was tobacco mixed with COPD. And so it was a decline. And then we reached out and we said, hey, why is it a decline? And like, well, you got an inhaler in tobacco. So that obviously means COPD. And come to find out, she's just had asthma since she was a child, before she used cigarettes, not as a child.
Yeah. I've,
And so
I've
then
had that happen with, I've had that happen with gestational diabetes. When somebody's pregnant, they get the code on their MIB for diabetes when really they just had gestational diabetes, and they get declined from an insurance carrier because it shows diabetes before a certain age, right? Diabetes before 30 or something like that, if they got it when they were in their 20s. So I've certainly had that happen and been able to clear it up. And I think it's important what you just said before we get into how you handle the conversation, that we want to identify if we can figure out maybe what's doing it, so that when we go back to the client, we can ask them specific questions about that maybe what's doing it. So there's, like Ashton said, there's varying levels of information that the different insurance carriers will give you. Some will give you none, some will give you absolutely everything, some will give you somewhere in the middle. One of the questions that I've always been able to ask, especially for a simplified issue carrier, that pretty much all of them answer is, what question on the application do you feel like should have been answered yes? What question do you think was incorrectly answered? And they'll go, 15B or like 7A or something like that. And I'll be able to go back to the client and say, okay, they found something in either your prescription history or your medical records that makes it seem like you've had heart attack, stroke, cancer, like whatever that question 7A is that you answered no. You'll be able to at least get yourself into a position to jog the client's memory about, oh yeah, I had this or I had that. Mm-hmm. So pretty much I've found that most insurance carriers will give you that. What question on the application should have been answered yes. And some of them are a little obstinate, but most of them will at least give you that. And, like you said, some of them will just tell you exactly what it is right away. And some of them will, keep that HIPAA data and that HIPAA privacy very, very tight. So now you've gotten a decline. Let's just say what it's for. You've been able to now drop back and identify, okay, I can't get them this based on this health issue. I can get them this. So, but importantly though, when you're making that phone call to them, you're just kind of like, hey, let's meet to go over your coverage?
Yeah.
Or are you saying something to them that kind of implies that you need to meet with them to come to some decisions?
No, I just simply call them and go, hey, how's it going, guys? Finally got some information back from the company. When's going to be the best time to get back together and go over this policy with you guys? And go over the information.
Got some information back from the insurance carrier, and when's a good time to go over it with you?
Yeah.
Is basically what you're saying.
Yeah, that's about it.
Perfect. Because, I do something very similar. I think the strategy that I've always taken is I always want it to be good news.
Yeah.
And I even say, hey, guys, I got some good news. And it's like they could have just been declined. And I have agents go like, what do you mean? That's not good news. That's bad news. Well, if I've already found them another carrier, then I do have good news for them. Hey, good news. I know exactly why you were declined, and I have a carrier that's going to accept you. But I always will make that call, just like you're saying, Ashton, and go, hey guys, good news. I got some great information about what you're going to qualify for. Let's meet and go over those options. I never send it by text message. I never do it by voicemail. I never send an email that says you've been declined. When can we get back together? I never make it sound negative like you've been declined. I always just say, hey, good news. I got some great information back from the insurance carrier we applied for. I want to get together with you and go over your options. When's a good time for you? And it's always just this positive light so that they're looking forward to that appointment. And then in that appointment, I can say exactly what you said. So it looks like because of this, and this insurance carrier isn't going to cover you. Bad news. But the good news is I've figured out why, and I have this other insurance carrier who will cover you. And, I'm just taking away the opportunity for them to even have an objection, because I'm still in that assumption mode of like, you would want insurance coverage. And then like you said, Ashton, I just got to figure out if it's a change in price. Do you want the same amount of coverage for more price, or do you want, the same price with lesser coverage? Which one fits best for you? And get a little decision from them on that. But I've never really had a problem with it because they know that I'm operating with new information that they didn't give me before. And had I've known that information, I would have come to them with this pricing anyway. So, Keith, what about you?
Well, a couple of quick tidbits. It's again, and the mindset is making sure that I know a lot about that family, who they are, what's important to them. So when I'm calling them with that, hey, we've hit a roadblock here, but I've got some good news. I'm also pulling that mindset string of, being able to relate to them and talk about things first. Hey, it's Keith. How's it going? How's this daughter? How's that son? Did they win the baseball game? All right, well, I just want to follow up with a few quick things. So I'm setting the scene of like we're still, all on the same page and keeping that in a good mode. Nobody likes bad news. Nobody likes bad news. And as soon as I call them, give them a punch in the gut and then go, well, I think I can help figure this out. They're already in the mind frame of, well, I thought you said it was going to go this way. I thought we expected this and we didn't. And so they're already in that mindset of like, oh, forget about it. I've when I was new, I heard that multiple times, that forget about it. So I would definitely say following up with people is just staying in that positive mind frame. Like you said, Brian, we've got good news, but also preempting that with continuing to build relationship. Relationship matters the most in this thing, and them trusting that I've got their best interest at heart, even when I don't have good news.
Man, that's such a great point, and I think it's a great point for us to end on as well, for people to take into practice. Is, for me, you just hit a power line in my brain, because it's also about remembering the reason why that family wanted insurance. And if that means that you need to take notes after every appointment, you need to put quick notes in your Google Calendar or whatever you're keeping your appointments in, or if you have an appointment journal or something like that, there's sometimes when you need to reinvigorate the reason why they wanted insurance in the first place, to help them wrap their brains around a new kind of coverage, especially if you sold them a term coverage or something like that, and they thought they were getting $200,000, and then you found out they had a medical condition that only qualifies them for more of a final expense type of product, and you're taking them from $200,000 down to $10,000 for the same price or something. You're really going to need to dig in and reinvigorate. Hey, Mr. Smith, I remember when you told me that when something happens to you, you don't want Mrs. Smith to be an XYZ. She's not going to be able to pay for this, this, and this. You told me that story about how your sister had breast cancer and went homeless. Whatever the story was that you dug out in that appointment of why they had the motivation to get coverage put in place. Sometimes you're going to need to access that again when you're giving them a whole new option after they've been declined. So, keeping, number one, doing that in your appointments is the first thing, right? Yep. And we got plenty of podcast content about, asking quality questions and really digging into the reason why people want insurance. But number two, you might need to rely on some notes that you have for an appointment. What's the daughter's name? Are they playing baseball? What's the dog's name? What do they do for work? How are things over there? I'm a real estate agent. Man, how difficult is it for you out there right now with inventory being so low, or whatever, to reinvigorate that relationship and get back into the reason why they wanted insurance, to reset the table for this new option that you're about to give them. You might need to have that information. So I really, man, it's such a great
Real
point,
quick
Keith.
tip I want to leave people with before we come off and end. You said a key word there, relationship, that, again, if you stuck around for this podcast, remember I said this, right? The reason they call me DJ Debt Free is because I write a lot of Symmetry's Debt Free Life, and that's 99% fully underwritten. So maintaining that relationship throughout the entire process is so, so important. And maybe captive insurance agents have this little advantage over the rest of us who aren't captive. I mean, I'd rather have the 30 different carriers in my hip, but make a relationship with an underwriter, right? They're people too.
Yeah.
So, get into, calling underwriters. And the way I found that to be helpful to me to sort of avoid declines or learn more from a decline was to call them and ask them for help. Call the specific carrier, get in touch with that specific underwriter and say, hey, I'm new, I'm learning. Can you give me a little bit of guidance on this case that I submitted? And a lot of them are willing to do it when they don't have to, release information that's going to put them in a bad light. But also they're willing to build that relationship, that trust. Some of them will give a little bit of information. So I'm not going to give any names of any underwriters, right? But I'm going to say that there are underwriters out there that want to see clients get approved as much as we do. And sometimes they're behind a little bit of, bureaucratic policy. So if they can steer us or pre-steer us before we write the policy and we have that information, that relationship with an underwriter is so super key. It has been to my success. There's a number of times where I know if cases landed in another underwriter's hands, they might have been declined. But the relationship I have with some of these underwriters has helped me to create like a pathway to an approval because I call them first. And they know it's me.
Yeah, definitely. Creating relationships, it always boggles my mind when I hear, people calling and like yelling at underwriters or like yelling at new business departments or like, sending emails with like, how dare you MFers, you know what I mean? Or something. It's like, dude, those are like the gatekeepers of your money, dude. Like, what are you doing?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't make any sense. So definitely, attracting more flies with honey in that particular situation, attracting more bees with honey, in that situation is certainly the best strategy to take. So I hope you guys got a lot out of this podcast episode. Remember, the 3 things that we went over were: number 1, get the information up front that you're going to need to casework properly and to get the products they qualify for. Number 2, make sure that when you're finished with the appointment, you're opening the door and telling them, if we get declined, I'm going to come back and I'm going to get you coverage, either option B, option C, option D, so that they know that there's a possibility that they may get declined. And then number 3, when you're getting back with them, it's always good news. We always have a strategy. You've got a couple little tidbits of how you can maybe pick up what that strategy is from underwriters and insurance carriers. And another reason to give yourself that week or so time frame when you're at the end of an appointment, telling them how things are going to go. So as always, we're going to keep bringing you fresh content, and we're going to keep putting out these little training podcasts. So definitely like and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Get on writemoreapps.com and subscribe to our podcast list, and we will come back to you with our next topic here in about a week.
See you, everybody.
$154 deposited from AIG right now. Hello.
Dude, you're
Thank
freaking
you,
baller.
AIG.
Go get you some Louis.
There you go.
Dude, I got $2,400 deposited so far today. I like that.
Look at that.
I like that. Mutual of Omaha, Foresters, National Life Group, John Hancock, American Amicable, AIG. Life is good.